Hello, I'm Teacher Kelly. We are going to talk about the judicial branch, the Supreme Court. The judicial branch, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. It has the final decision, no more appeals. So if somebody doesn't like the decision that their court makes, they can appeal it and go to a higher court, and they can appeal it again and again and again until they get to the Supreme Court. Once it's gone through the Supreme Court, it cannot be appealed anymore. There are 9 Supreme Court justices. The Supreme Court justices are appointed by the president. Supreme Court facts. The Supreme Court agrees to hear about 100 to 150 of the more than 7,000 cases that it is asked to review each year. The Supreme Court justices are appointed for a lifetime. Can they retire, you ask? The retirement age of a Supreme Court judge is 65, and for a High Court judge, it's 62. They must have served a minimum of 15 years to retire. Justice Stephen Breyer retired this past summer in 2022. He served from 1994 to 2022. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, newest judge to be sworn in, just sworn in the summer of 2022. Longest judge in office, Clarence Thomas. He was sworn in October 15th, 1991, and he was appointed by George Bush. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the most recent judge to die, second woman to become the Supreme Court justice. She died on September 18th, 2020 at the age of 87 from complications of metastatic pancreatic cancer. She lived from 1993 to 2020. Supreme Court firsts. First woman, Sandra Day O'Connor. First African-American, Thurgood Marshall. First Hispanic, Sonia Sotomayor. Famous court cases, Dred Scott versus Marbury from 1857. Dred Scott versus Sanford, the Supreme Court ruled that Americans of African descent, whether slave or free, were not American citizens and could not sue in federal court. The court also ruled that Congress lacked power to ban slavery in U.S. territories. Finally, the court declared that the rights of slave owners were constitutionally protected by the Fifth Amendment because slaves were categorized as property. Not a proud moment in American history. Plessy versus Ferguson. Homer Plessy, who was Black under Louisiana law of the time, boarded a train and sat in a car that was reserved for white passengers. When he refused to move, he was arrested. Plessy argued that the Separate Car Act, which was required for all railroads to provide equal but separate accommodations, was violating his rights under the 14th Amendment's equal protection. The Supreme Court held 7-1 that separate but equal was accommodations for whites, and Blacks did not violate the 14th Amendment. Another not proud moment. This was overturned many years later. Famous and controversial court cases. Brown versus the Board of Education declared state laws that established separate but equal public schools for Black and white students unconstitutional. This was in May 17th, 1954. This is a story about Ruby Bridges. The federal marshals had to go and escort her to school. She is still alive today. And a movie was made about her life.
And the minute we turned the corner, I saw what I thought was Mardi Gras. There were so many people standing out in the middle of the street, and they were screaming and shouting and throwing things.
I draw the line in the dust, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
The car door opened, and those federal marshals, they grabbed my hand, and I remember them saying, "Ruby, walk straight ahead and don't look back."
I say to the mothers to keep their kids out of school, all together. We're white people. We don't want them to go to school.
One of the city policemen, he pulled his gun to shoot, and everybody said they knew probably to kill me. They said if they killed the mother, the child wouldn't have went.
200 people waiting at 8:30 in the morning to tell her they were going to kill her. 200 people in the afternoon telling her they were going to kill her.
The crowd would come, and they would bring a small baby's coffin, and they put this black doll inside of the coffin, and they would march around the school, and I would have to pass it to get inside of the building. And I used to have nightmares about the coffin.
This is a people's movement. It doesn't make any difference whether the major politicians are going to support you or not. If they don't support us in this movement to take back our government and give it to us and let us run our own institutions, those who stand in the way are liable to get run over.
The election of 2000 was the one and only presidential election that the Supreme Court got involved in. Loving versus Virginia. So Loving was their last name. Virginia is the state. This 1967 landmark case, as it broke the barriers for interracial marriages, the case was brought to the Supreme Court, and racial integrity law that forbade this marriage was ruled unconstitutional. This happened in June 12, 1967, and there was a movie made about this. In summary, there are 9 Supreme Court justices. They are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. The longest serving judge is Clarence Thomas. I hope you have a better understanding about how the Supreme Court works.